Americanisms is where it's very American. It's very American flavoured, right? For the American people, type thing. As for the traditional pronouns thou, thee, and thine, the old Shakespeare speak, in reference to the deity, the translators judge that to use these archaisms, they're really old, right? Archaic, because Old English, Middle English, Shakespeare speak, along with the old verb forms such as doest, wouldest, and hadst, would violate accuracy in translation. Neither Hebrew, Aramaic, nor Greek uses special pronouns for the persons of the Godhead. A present-day translation is not enhanced by forms that in the time of the King James Version were used in everyday speech, whether referring to God or man. For the Old Testament, the standard Hebrew text, again, the Masoretic text, as published in the latest editions of Biblia Hebraica, was used throughout. Again, the Dead Sea Scrolls contain material bearing on an earlier stage of the Hebrew text. Wasn't like portions of it, or a large portion of it, in ancient Aramaic. They were consulted, as were the Samaritan Pentateuch and the ancient scribal traditions relating to textual changes. Sometimes a variant Hebrew reading in the margin of the Masoretic text was followed instead of the text itself. Such instances, being variants within the Masoretic tradition, are not specified by footnotes. In rare cases, words in the consonantal text were divided differently from the way they appear in the Masoretic text. Footnotes indicate this. The translators also consulted the more important early versions, the Septuagint, or the LXX, Aquila, Symmachus, and Theodotion. We've actually done videos on those two. The Vulgate, it's the Latin Vulgate. The Syriac Peshitta, which one was that? The Eastern Syriac Peshitta? It probably is. So I would put the Syriac Peshitta, Western Peshitta, right? The Targums, they'd be the Aramaic ones maybe. And for the Psalms, the Juxta Hebraica of Jerome. Readings from these versions were occasionally followed, where the Masoretic text seemed doubtful and where accepted principles of textual criticism showed that one or more of these textual witnesses appeared to provide the correct reading. Such instances are footnoted. Sometimes vowels, letters, and vowel signs did not, in the judgment of the translators, represent the correct vowels for the original consonantal text. Accordingly, some words were read with a different set of vowels. These instances are usually not indicated by footnotes. The Greek text used in translating the New Testament was an eclectic one. No other piece of ancient literature has such an abundance of manuscript witnesses as does the New Testament. Where existing manuscripts differ, the translators made their choice of readings according to accepted principles of New Testament textual criticism. Footnotes called attention to places where there was uncertainty about what the original text was. The best current printed texts of the Greek New Testament were used. There is a sense in which the work of translation is never wholly finished, or completely finished. This applies to all great literature and uniquely so to the Bible. In 1973, the New Testament in the New International Version was published. Since then, suggestions for corrections and revisions had been received from various sources. The Committee on Bible Translation carefully considered the suggestions and adopted a number of them. These were incorporated in the first printing of the entire Bible in 1978. Additional revisions were made by the Committee on Bible Translation in 1983 and appear in printings after that date. As in other ancient documents, the precise meaning of the biblical text is sometimes uncertain. This is more often the case with the Hebrew and Aramaic text than with the Greek text. Although archaeological and linguistic discoveries in this century and in understanding difficult passages, some uncertainties remain. The more significant of these have been called to the reader's attention in the footnotes. Okay, so that's pretty honest there. In regard to the divine name YHWH or Yahweh, commonly referred to as a tetragrammaton, the translators adopted the device used in most English versions of rendering that name as Lord, capital L, lowercase letters. Actually, there's one capital L and the rest are capital letters, to distinguish it from Adonai. Another Hebrew word rendered Lord. So it's L with lowercase letters, capital L for lowercase letters, for which small letters are used. Whether the two names stand together in the Old Testament as a compound name of God, they are rendered. Wherever the two names stand together in the Old Testament as a compound name of God, they are rendered Sovereign Lord. Because for most readers today the phrases the Lord of Hosts and God of Hosts have little meaning, this version, New International Version, renders them the Lord Almighty and God Almighty. These renderings convey the sense of the Hebrew, namely, He who is sovereign over all the hosts, powers, in heaven and on earth, especially over the hosts, armies of Israel. For readers unacquainted with Hebrew, this does not make clear the distinction between Sabaoth, host or Almighty, and Shaddai, which can also be translated Almighty. But the latter occurs infrequently and is always footnoted. When Adonai and YHWH or Yahweh, Sabaoth, occur together, they are rendered the Lord, the Lord Almighty. As for other proper nouns, the familiar spellings of the King James Version are generally retained. Names traditionally spelled with ch or ch, except where it is final, are usually spelled in this translation with k or c, since the biblical languages do not have the sound that ch frequently indicates in English. For example, in chant, for well-known names such as Zechariah, however, the traditional spelling has been retained. Variations in the spelling of names in the original languages, that would be the Aramaic, the Hebrew, and the Greek, has usually not been indicated. Where a person or place has two or more different names in the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek text, the more familiar one has generally been used, with footnotes where needed. To achieve clarity, the translators sometimes supplied words not in the original text but required by the context. If there was uncertainty about such material, it is enclosed in brackets. Also, for the sake of clarity or style, nouns, including some proper nouns, are sometimes substituted for pronouns and vice versa. And though the Hebrew writers often shifted back and forth between first, second and third personal pronouns without change of antecedent, this translation, NIV, often makes them uniform in accordance with English style and without the use of footnotes. Poetical passages are printed as poetry, that is with indentation of lines and with separate stanzas. These are generally designed to reflect the structure of Hebrew poetry. This poetry is in the Old Testament, and scholars differ regarding the scansion of Hebrew lines. The translators determine the stanza divisions for the most part by analysis of the subject matter. The stanzas therefore serve as poetic paragraphs. As an aid to the reader, italicized sectional headings are inserted in most of the books. They are not to be regarded as part of the NIV text, are not for oral reading, and are not intended to dictate the interpretation of the sections they head. The footnotes in this version are of several kinds, most of which need no explanation. Those giving alternative translations begin with or, and generally introduce the alternative with the last word preceding it in the text, except when it is a single word alternative. In poetry quoted in a footnote, a slant mark indicates a line division. Footnotes introduced by or do not have uniform significance. In some cases, two possible translations were considered to have about equal validity. In other cases, though, the translators were convinced that the translation in the text was correct, they judged that another interpretation was possible and of sufficient importance to be represented in a footnote. In the New Testament, footnotes that refer to uncertainty regarding the original text are introduced by some manuscripts or similar expressions. In the Old Testament, evidence for the reading chosen is given first, and evidence for the alternative is added after a semicolon. For example, Septuagint, Hebrew, Father. In such notes, the term Hebrew refers to the Masoretic text. It should be noted that minerals, flora, that's flowers, right, and fauna, that's grass coverings, etc. Probably shrubs and bushes and etc. Architectural details, articles of clothing and jewellery, musical instruments and other articles cannot always be identified with precision. Also, measures of capacity in the biblical period are particularly uncertain. See the table of weights and measures following the text. Like all translations of the Bible, made as they are by imperfect men or imperfect man, this one undoubtedly falls short of its goals. Yet, these writers, publishers, etc., this committee maybe, we're grateful to God for the extent to which He enabled us to realise these goals, or them to realise these goals, and for the strength He had given them and their colleagues to complete their task. They offered this version of the Bible to Him, in whose name and for whose glory it has been made. And they prayed that it would lead many into a better understanding of the Holy Scriptures and a fuller knowledge of Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word, or of whom the Scriptures so faithfully testify. It speaks about Him from the very beginning to the very end, from Genesis 1 verse 1 right to Revelations 22, and that last verse there, 21-22. You better check that, just in case you got 21. I believe it has got 22. Yes, 22, 21. Okay, so they prayed that this NIV would lead many to a better understanding of the Holy Scriptures and a fuller knowledge of Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word, of whom the Scriptures so faithfully testify. The Committee on Bible Translation, June 1978, and this was revised in August 1983. Names of the translators and editors may be secured from the International Bible Society. Translation sponsors of the New International Version, 1820 Jetstream, and it's got an address there in Colorado, USA. You have the Old Testament of the NIV. Basically the same as every other Americanized English modern version. Maybe the wording is slightly different. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. God said, let there be light, etc., etc. You would find a lot of these versions at BibleHub.com, Bible Gateway, etc. These Americanized English modern versions that everybody's teaching and preaching from today. And you're saying, mine is the best. No, mine's correct. Yours is full of this and that. And they're fighting over versions. No, my King James version is the one. King James only, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, give us a couple of these. Subscribe to our channel, and then add your comments down below, and we'll get back to you before the rapture, one of those. And then go share this video with all your family, friends, and others. May God bless you, keep you, and give you abundance for watching this, our latest video upload.